Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever the world you are. Hope you're doing great. Thanks for joining with another session with Microsoft Zero to Hero community. Gonna add my slides here to quickly introduce our today's speaker, William Assaf from Microsoft, with the topic contributing to open source Microsoft Docs. I'm really excited to learn more about this experience and the topic itself. And I'm gonna go quickly to the next slide, not to spend much time. Just want to quickly add William here just to kick off the session. So gonna talk a little bit about Microsoft Learn. This is the richest ever greatest place that you can find anything related to Microsoft technologies. You can follow training paths, you can make customized training paths, you can do exam practices with Microsoft Learn. So we are all together on this path, and this is really important that in your learning journey, in your career journey, to stay up to date with the services and technologies from Microsoft, with following Microsoft Learn, and also tech communities from Microsoft Learn, like Learning Rooms and Microsoft Zero to Hero community, and also other learning rooms. Just make it your homepage. This is what I always try to mention in every session. So making it in your homepage will make you get motivated and learn more and more on a daily basis. So as mentioned, learning rooms are also part of the tech community, that it brings everyone together within the Microsoft Learn Teams tenant, that you can ask any questions in different areas and different channels regarding the specialty you have or the things you want to learn. So this is Microsoft Build month, and also this is also our exclusive calendar for Microsoft Learn for May and also June for post Microsoft Build sessions. So this is really important to register and attend sessions to get stay up to date and learn more about Microsoft AI services with Microsoft, with the lead in the market with AI services. So this is really important to learn about Microsoft AI services with whatever specialty you have or whatever you are doing with cloud services or any other Microsoft Cloud services. So just register now and save a seat for yourself. As a last slide, I'm going to share a slide, the code of conduct. So during the session, being aware of each other and being friendly and patient and welcoming and respectful and opening to all questions and viewpoint and understanding differences and being kind and considerate to each other. Gonna add William to the stage. Hi, William.
Hey, Hamid. This is exciting. How cool was that introduction? It's awesome.
Thank
Production
you.
value. This is
Excited
great.
to have you and also learn more about this topic.
Looking forward to it. All right.
I'm gonna
Let's
add
go.
you a slide to here.
Yeah. So contributing to Microsoft open source docs is the kind of the title we advertised it as, but really GitHub plus docs plus your career. And I want to talk at least at the very beginning and also throughout about how this is good for you and your career, especially. So let's get started. Just by the way, whether or not you're an MVP like Hamid, or whether you're looking to be an MVP, or whether you're just looking to learn, this is all good stuff. Here's our agenda today. How do you learn more about the Microsoft Learn community? So it's not just a platform for learning; it's a vibrant hub where learners like to come together and connect and engage and empower. So this is all really good stuff. Let's talk about contributing to Microsoft Docs. We're going to talk about Learn and some of the other cool stuff as well. So I work for Microsoft. I'm on the database docs team. So personally, and I was an MVP before and a consultant. I worked on SQL Server and Azure SQL and stuff like that. So now I work on docs for those same type of areas that I had expertise in. So on the database docs team, we work with product groups and program managers for everything SQL Server, Azure SQL, all its various flavors in Azure, as well as Azure Synapse, Microsoft Fabric, and all the technologies under those big umbrellas too. And we also cover content for data platform tooling like Management Studio and Azure Data Studio. And we're called the Database Docs team because we also cover the open source databases like Azure SQL Database for MySQL or MariaDB or Postgres, as well as Cosmos DB, which thanks to its many APIs, Cosmos DB is like 5 databases in one platform. It's very cool. But we're just one content team, and today we're not talking about those databases. This is not a SQL Server presentation, I promise, but rather I'm talking about all of Microsoft Docs for all technologies. So Microsoft Docs are not Wikipedia. It's not open to all edits and rapid pace, but we do have hundreds of thousands of articles, and we want to embrace the wisdom of you in the technical user community to help maintain a high level of quality. So opening the docs up to external contributors in an open source style with GitHub, and I'm going to walk you all through that. It's part of how we scale too. So how can you contribute to content on Microsoft Learn? I want to get your mind going with a bunch of ideas on how you can contribute to Learn content at whatever level of expertise you have. So keep these in mind for more ways to contribute and to engage with Microsoft Learn and the community of peers that you have all over the world. So all of this contributes, by the way, to your Microsoft MVP activity report, and it's looked at qualitatively, not quantitatively. I'm not going to talk a lot about the MVP application process. If you're interested in that, I'll give you a little bit. And I'm not on that side either. I'm not reviewing MVP applications, but I have reviewed MVP applications and stuff like that when questions are coming up about, how big a deal was this change? Was this fixing a typo? Was this actually contributing content? That's what I mean by qualitatively, not quantitatively. So let me talk about all the different ways you can contribute to Microsoft Learn. So Q&A. This is probably the easiest way to engage by responding and updating answers with better solutions, especially if you find an old answer that was accepted as the solution, but now stuff has changed, or there's a better way to do this, or there's a more, there's a newer product or something like that. It's a great idea to update an existing solution out there. You can create and customize Learn collections. So these Learn collections can then be socialized. So what's a Learn collection? I'm going to show you a button that helps add things to Learn collections later on. But this is where you can gather up docs. You can gather up Learn modules, like the training units. You can gather up Q&A answers from the Q&A website, and even external links, external to Microsoft, all together in a single topic. And then you can share this Learn collection publicly on social media, on LinkedIn, on your blog, as possible recommended learning solutions for a certification exam, or for a project, or for doing something like specifically this, or for a class if you're a student. And so you can share those kind of things in a collection for your own personal benefit and then publicly as well. So this was just introduced. So similar, you can also create a plan of existing modules, Learn modules, Microsoft Learn modules, and then you can assemble them together into a learning plan. It may follow an existing plan, or we already have a bunch of published plans out there for all of the job roles, for example, that we have on Microsoft Learn. But you could put together your own plan and then give it out. You can give it to friends, you can give it to your employees or your colleagues, your fellow students, anybody like that. And you can actually track their progress, and they can get notifications of their progress and track their progress through your plan. So as a manager or a team lead, you could assign Learn modules and then track their progress kind of as a homework assignment, but you don't have to make it unfun like that. So already, like I said, there's Microsoft developed learning plans for a variety of career paths, what we call job roles, at learn.microsoft.com/training/career-paths. That's a pretty easy site to find. And you can find these Learn plans for each one of those jobs. And then those custom Learn collections or plans can become what's called a cloud skills challenge. And so you can use the same content for a cloud skills challenge. And this is a new collection on a specific topic to gamify the learning experience with individuals or team goals of completing a custom list of learning materials. So cloud skills challenges can have a leaderboard, and it can be a fun way to challenge your social networks, your readers, your subscribers, your customers, your colleagues, your fellow students, or just everybody in your technical community about a learning goal. And then finally, the last thing that we're talking about most today, how to contribute to Microsoft content, is what we're talking about today, is how you would interact with the rest of my database docs team and with all the other content teams around Microsoft. There's lots of them about contributing to open source docs on GitHub. So why would you want to contribute to docs specifically? There's quite a few reasons, and we'll hope I'll appeal at some point to your time and your attention here. So you can identify opportunities to improve docs, to prevent common design mistakes, to prevent something that you ran into as well. Share your wisdom, your own lessons learned that would help others. You could add a note or a caution or something like that to expand somebody's attention to an important topic. Or you could expand or add to existing sample scripts, perhaps with a helpful comment here or an explanation there, or something like that. Those sample scripts could always use more context sometimes, or maybe other options or something like that. That's a great way to start. Also, frequently asked questions articles. If you find an FAQ article and you find a question in there that you know the answer to, or maybe something that could be asked and answered in an FAQ, that's a great way, and that's a good call to action, is to go find an FAQ article in your area of expertise or whatever it is you're learning about. And if you don't see something answered otherwise, otherwhere in docs, add an FAQ item. That's a great way to contribute. How about some more internal benefits to you and your career? So by contributing to docs, which is all public, you get opportunities to show your manager and show your contributions to a product area. This is good for your career to demonstrate leadership potentially in a technical area. If you're a consultant, show your clients. If you're a student, show your teacher, your classmates, things like that. If you got a manager, everybody's got a manager, show your manager, hey, I contributed to this thing. I actually know what I'm talking about. You can get your name known to the Microsoft content developers like me, to program managers who work on the software that you work in whatever it is your area of expertise is. And you can be a resource to folks like me, folks like on the content team. We know who our favorite external contributors are through their GitHub ID, through their GitHub contributions. And so we know them. You can establish your own personal brand, obviously for MVP recognition and activity as a contributor, if not an expert in your area. And then finally, inside Learn, and I'm going to show you some examples. We have a team that has started to do a series of contributor spotlights where we interview people. These are either internal to Microsoft or external to Microsoft, folks like out in the community, MVPs potentially, who have been going above and beyond to contribute to Microsoft Docs. So for example, getting your name known here. For more than a year now, the Azure Developer Community blog has been publishing regular spotlight stories based on interviews with contributors whose responsibilities are not to work on docs. They're doing this as an open source activity on the side. For example, internal folks would be like an escalation engineer. Their job at Microsoft is not to work on docs, but they are anyway. So we would like to thank them and recognize them for that. These public blogs are then boosted on LinkedIn, and are just one more way that we have been trying to encourage and reward contributions to Learn content to make it better for everybody. These spotlights are nominated by the docs teams, by folks like myself. And the same folks who are going to review and sign off on your GitHub pull request, which I'll show you how later on. And this is obviously a pretty nice little item to list on your MVP activity report as well. Okay, enough about MVP activity report stuff. If you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer. But any questions so far that have come up? Otherwise, let's keep going. All right, let's roll. So I'm going to show you some screenshots of a Microsoft doc and some of the new features that have popped up recently, or at least in the past year, stuff that you may not have noticed. Show you how to use them. So just to give you a heads up, this is the What's New in Azure SQL Database article on docs. Some features that we have here. I'm not going to explain every button, every link here, but some cool stuff. So right away, this little cluster of buttons up here in the top right-hand corner, this is new. You see a little plus sign inside the circle? That plus button allows you to save links to collections. Remember, the collections are the things where you can save anything to. Stuff inside Microsoft, stuff outside of Microsoft, you can put it all together. Collections are something you can put all your knowledge together. So that would add it to a collection that I mentioned earlier. You can also save docs to a collection alongside Microsoft Learn modules, QA pages, everything else, right? Okay, so feedback. This is this little feedback button right here is going to allow you to submit an immediate feedback, thumbs up and thumbs down, and a comment about this article in the form of what we call a verbatim, which is quick, it's one directional. You're just sending off feedback, good or bad, about something. If you want to point something out, you don't want to fix it, this is the place to do that. If you want to point something out and you do want to fix it, that's a pull request. We're going to talk about how to do that later. I'm going to walk you through it. But the pull request you would get started on by hitting the pencil button right there. So the other thing that I have in a red box right here, the pencil button next to the sharing button, pencil button helps you start a new pull request in github.com. I'm going to talk about this and walk you through it in detail shortly. This is an important part of our presentation today. So over on the right, this is relatively new. These are all documents, resource links that are automatically generated by a machine learning algorithm. Up in the top right-hand corner, one of two search boxes on the page. This one searches the entire technology stack that you're in. For example, all of Azure, for example, right? From the results page, you can then expand your search to all of Docs if you wanted to. Over here on the left side, not all folks realize what filter by title means. This actually is only searching on the titles in the table of contents. So the titles of articles, that's it. So the TOC includes many different articles for the product, and by searching just titles, often you can get to right where you wanted to go faster than searching all of docs. So keep that in mind. And when you're searching for a title, this could be faster if you know the title of the article you're looking for or the basic concept that you're looking for. You might find this more convenient. That's why we have them. At the top of the article, in the center is going to be like a mini table of contents, navigation links. You can immediately jump through an article's major headings. And then also in many articles, not all, but especially around SQL Server, where there's so many versions of SQL Server and so many different platforms of SQL Server. This also, you'll see this in other articles as well. And I think this is also coming to some other places like the Kusto area. I think they're going to be implementing this soon. You'll find an applies to line with little green check marks here. And each of these little green check marks has a hyperlink as well. So not only does this tell you what platforms this applies to, and by omission, what platforms it does not apply to, but it helps bring you to a navigation guide page. So if you click on the link at the top of one of those articles, it'll bring you to a navigation guide page. This one would be specifically for the database platform. It's going to help you break down and understand the products and which is which. It's not too detailed, and it should be pretty easy to understand what's going on, what product you were probably in as well. So as a quick aside, if it says applies to SQL Server, and okay, so this content is a little more SQL Server centric. I'm old DBA, for example, forgive me. If it says applies to SQL Server, it almost certainly means the SQL Server year box products, like SQL Server 2022, or the version of SQL Server that you can get on Azure Virtual Machine, or like you can run on-prem. It probably does not mean that it applies to Azure SQL Database. That's a different platform, and it would probably say something like Azure SQL Database if it did apply to Azure SQL Database. We try to pay attention to a lot of these applies to lines and the metadata about them. So if you spot something that doesn't look quite right, like, hey, this says it applies to this product, but this part doesn't, that's a good contribution to the article. We could clarify within the article, maybe split the article, and make sure it applies to the products as the products are growing and evolving constantly, to make sure that the articles are applying to the right products, versions or platforms of different products too. This is obviously not simple, and you can help us there potentially if you find something like that. So that's a good thing to point out. If there's any questions about any of this stuff, obviously happy to expand and explain, but I'll keep going. Each header in the article is linkable directly. So if you have a very tall article and you're looking just to send a header, just hover over the header, you see the little link symbol appear. And when you click on that link symbol, it's going to put up in the top in the URL, it's going to put, that one right there, it's going to put a little pound and then, whatever the heading is, you can link directly to a deep part of the article. That's called an anchor link. Finally, in the bottom left-hand corner, you see the download PDF option. You may have seen some communication about this in the past, about how this feature is going to be going away or changing. We actually got some good community feedback about how important offline versions of our docs are to some communities. For example, if you work in a very high security environment, not just like military or government, but imagine you work at like a nuclear power plant or something like that. Those are fairly well locked down physically from the external networks. So I talked to a DBA, for example, who has to walk across the street and walk into a different security zone, download a doc, print it out, and then bring it back into the nuclear power plant where he works to get access to those docs to work on it together. So we do have a new system for offline docs downloads coming soon, but you can still download these PDFs. So watch for new features in this space potentially. And then lastly, especially if you're an MVP or if you're looking to become an MVP, let's talk about this article itself, the What's New article. These What's New articles are available in various areas. They are great inspiration for your own social media, for your blogging, for presentations that you want to give to a local group, for your own learning to keep up with what's been going on. So these What's New pages on various services are a gold mine for inspiration, for learning. You can talk about what's new in the product. So for example, perhaps a feature just went from preview to GA or generally available. That'd be a great topic, and you'll see that reflected in these various pages. And a lot of services, not all, a lot of services have these what's new in pages. And so I encourage you, for whatever area it is, to keep up with, to follow these type of pages to figure out what's going on in your area. Okay. I don't need to talk about the SQL Server offline help. If anybody has any questions about that specifically, I'll come back to it. But so speaking of Management Studio, which is part of Visual Studio, and so a lot of people probably use Visual Studio. If you don't, that's okay. But the F1 feature in Visual Studio, and therefore in Management Studio as well, is all driven by metadata in the article. So you can highlight something, like I'm highlighting an internal DMV here, SysDM exec sessions, and I'm hitting F1 on it, and it's bringing me straight to the article for that thing, right? That's pretty cool. And that's all driven by metadata in those articles. And so if you hit F1 on something and it doesn't bring you to the article you expected, it doesn't bring you to a specific article, or it brings you to like a generic landing page type article, that is another way we could potentially contribute, that you could contribute to docs to improve the docs experience for everybody. Because this F1 thing is pretty handy. And once you start using it, you'll figure out, hey, this actually can bring me right to what I'm talking about. The reference article, for example, that I need. Versioning, we'll talk about versioning real quick. I mentioned that the applies to thing at the top, but this is all actually driven by metadata in the article too. So this is your first glimpse at Markdown. I'll talk a little bit more about Markdown, but where it makes sense, the same doc might include different information for different versions of the product that I mentioned. So we may use the same article for the same content for SQL Server on Windows versus SQL Server on Linux, for example. And it's going to show different content depending on what you have selected in the top left-hand corner. So remember, in the top left-hand corner, next to that TOC search, there was like a drop-down. And in the SQL Server area, that drop-down is full of all these things, like all the different ways you can get the SQL Server database engine. In .NET, there's a drop-down for all the different versions of .NET. And there's similar drop-downs in some areas where we use that where it's appropriate, right? Keep in mind what thing you have selected, because if it is not the product that you're looking for, you're going to be given different information, right? So make sure you've selected the product that you're looking for. This bottom left-hand snippet right here is the Markdown, showing how one article could display different content depending on the version requested, and you request that version by looking at that big drop-down list. So if a doc doesn't look quite right, take a look at what version you're in. If you're in the right version and it still doesn't look right, that's an opportunity to contribute. Say, hey, this thing changed in whatever version that I am using. Maybe this needs to be drawn attention to. That's a great way to contribute to a document. Sometimes you'll handle versioning via tabs inside of a document that clearly states how to do this in C# versus VB.NET versus something else, or how to do this in the Azure portal versus PowerShell versus the CLI versus API, something like that, right? Or we'll clearly state with like applies to lines about what versions apply to what in certain headings, or we'll use those colorful note boxes to make sure that you know what version or platform that we're talking about. So we use different we have different strategies, we have different approaches to all of these different things to use where appropriate. Okay, cool. Any questions, by the way? I'll stop right there. Any other questions that have popped up so far? I'll pause, and hearing nothing, I will keep going. Great stuff. If you have any questions, be happy to answer them throughout the presentation or at the end. So anyone can contribute to docs. I've given you a bunch of different examples so far on the type of contributions that you could do, but how would you do them? So we have a step-by-step tutorial at this URL right here to guide you through the process of creating a GitHub pull request. If your job doesn't have you working in GitHub all the time and you have no idea what a pull request is, don't worry about it. It's super easy. You press some big green buttons and boom, you've got a pull request going. Otherwise, it kind of just looks like a form, right? If you do work in GitHub all the time, you are familiar with Git, you know what a pull request is, you do this kind of thing as you're part of your job, this is all going to make sense to you as well. And it's going to appear to be probably simplified and pretty easy for you as well. By contributing to Microsoft Docs for any product technology, you can be a part of the community and help edit docs that everyone uses. So we're going to talk about getting a public contributor designation at the top of an article if you contribute. And we average, I don't know, 150 million page views a month, 11 million in my area alone per month. So it's a lot of exposure. If you want, you could do this entirely within the browser. So again, if you don't know what Git, you don't have Git Bash installed, you don't know what a pull request is, you can do this entirely within the browser. There's nothing to download or install. You do not have to write any Bash, or you don't have to open up a terminal. You can do it entirely within the browser with nothing to download or install. All you need is a free github.com account. That's it. And always turn on your two-factor authentication with that stuff. So I'm going to walk you through it right now. Speaking of two-factor authentication, you should really enable, this is a bit of an aside, two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication on your GitHub account, on your email, on your bank, and everywhere you can. Don't be dumb about your own security. This is actually going to be required for most corporate repositories, including for Microsoft employees to contribute to Microsoft private or internal repositories. I recommend not only using your phone number or your phone app for this. If you lose your phone or you get a new one just on purpose, you may find yourself unable to access your GitHub accounts. So definitely recommend using something that's not your phone number. SIM swap attacks are a common vector for bypassing multi-factor authentication. So honestly, a hardware key with backup copies somewhere is a great method for securing your accounts. It's a pretty cheap, inexpensive commodity in your pocket. That's probably a better choice than the very expensive commodity in your pocket, your phone, right? So regardless of your multi-factor authentication method, be sure to also download and save your two-factor authentication codes that GitHub or whatever platform you're enabling this stuff on gives you. Take two-factor authentication seriously. Do not lose your recovery codes. If you lose your device and you lose your recovery codes, there's nothing they can do to give you access back to your account, right? So this could have, for example, saved a Microsoft engineer that I worked with who got a new phone and then lost access to his GitHub account. So you can back up your security codes in your GitHub account settings. You can gain access to those. If you don't know where those backups are, go to your GitHub account settings, go under account security and get those back. Save them off somewhere else. All right. Another quick aside. Did you know that GitHub has a dark theme now? Can I get a hands up? I can't see your hands. Can I get a hands up for anybody who's a big fan of dark mode on everything? Just work in a cave, dark mode apps all around. I am. So a couple ways you can change your theme in GitHub. You can see that GitHub has a ton of different themes to choose, including having it automatically sync with your Chrome or your Windows operating system for night and day. That's pretty cool. Did you also know that learn.microsoft.com has a dark theme too? So if you're an enthusiast for dark mode like me, learn.microsoft.com has a theme you can choose at the bottom. You can choose dark. Check out the footer on any Docs website to change your theme. Dark mode has also arrived in the latest Word and Office and LinkedIn and Teams. And that's Word right there. And Excel and even Xbox has dark mode pages. Yes. Amazing. Awesome. I love it. Dark mode by default everywhere. Okay, enough about that. I can hear you cheering in the background. Okay, so to be clear, what belongs in Docs pull requests, right? And there's also this thing called GitHub issues, which I'm going to talk about briefly too. Support issues don't belong here. What kind of things should we talk about? I've talked about different things. I've talked about FAQ articles and the metadata and the F1 and does it apply to here, giving you different ideas. None of those things are a support. I am having a problem here. I need an answer on this. That is not what we're talking about today. Open source GitHub pull requests are not a way to ask for support or for clarification. It could be a way to point out that something is not clear, but you shouldn't expect any kind of SLA on this kind of stuff. If you're having a problem, if you're having an outage, if you're blocked by something, don't wait on a docs fix. Go ahead and contact support or your support partner or something like that. There's no SLA for response time on the stuff that we're talking about today with open source contribution. The doc is a great way to start your investigation and potentially to follow up on the doc after you've fixed your problem or after your ticket has been resolved in the solution. That could be a great contribution to a doc. So even if in the past you have had something fixed by Microsoft support or something else, or you unblocked yourself and you save yourself a note or you put it in your toolbox, everybody should have a toolbox of like notes and scripts and stuff that they have done over the years. Those are potentially great contributions to docs, right? Helping else helping somebody else out who might have had the same problem. If you do put like something that sounds like a support issue in a GitHub pull request or a GitHub issue, and it sounds like a support issue, you're probably just going to have your issue closed with a polite message and maybe some links to go and investigate further. So for product ideas and product feedback, like, hey, I wish the product did this, or the product could do this, and this is how it would work. I mean, that's great. We love those ideas, but there's a place for that, and it's not what we're talking about today either. So for product ideas and product feedback, go to feedback.azure.com. So for SQL, it's we have a little aka AMS SQL feedback, right? So if you may remember things like Connect items or user voice systems in the past, that's now been replaced by a new system called feedback.azure.com. And most of the old ideas have been migrated, but not with their usernames attached to them for GDPR and privacy purposes. So they've been anonymized. But feedback.azure.com hosts product feedback channels for many Microsoft products. Again, this is not a presentation about SQL Server. I'm talking about everything. I'm talking about what you do in Microsoft technology here. So most docs issues that do get attentions are ones that request that we fix something, that we add something missing, something is outdated, something is wrong, add something that would have helped me prevent or resolve an error or an outage or something like that. Those are good ideas of what we're talking about today. So to submit an issue, which is not a part of the solution, but you just want to point out something wrong, again, use that feedback button that we talked about before, which is the thumbs up, thumbs down, and then give me some context about it. Most doc issues that get attention are a request to fix something. If you want to get an issue submitted, we've evolved that recently. We don't use GitHub issues in many repositories. Some repositories may still be accepting GitHub issues, but they probably will not in the future. We have tried to receive all of that type of feedback through that feedback button, not through GitHub issues. We do prefer GitHub pull requests. So those are, if you're not familiar with GitHub, those are two different ways to like comment or to provide feedback on any open source project, including open source projects like Microsoft Docs. But the repository level, you can disable issues. We probably have disabled issues on many GitHub Docs repositories. So we're looking for either the feedback through the feedback button or preferably through pull requests. We imagine that pull requests are more thought through. They're much more actionable, and they give you credit for contributing to the fix to the doc. Right? I'll talk more about that soon. So let's talk about contributing to GitHub pull requests. You found something in the documentation that's out of date, that's wrong, that's missing, and you want to add a suggestion to get edits started yourself. You can click on that pencil button, top right-hand corner, right? And then click on, and now you're in github.com and you're looking at a GitHub flavored markdown preview of the article. You're not on learn.microsoft.com anymore. You're in github.com. Click on the pencil button again. After you click on that pencil button, now you're looking at the actual markdown code in a text box. By the way, there may be like an interstitial page in there before. If you've never worked in that repository, to go ahead and fork the repo, just hit the big green button and move on. You're good. So you're looking at markdown right here. It might surprise you to learn that Microsoft Docs are not edited in Microsoft Word. Nope, but rather in code, in Markdown, or less commonly in YAML. Markdown is a lightweight text markup language created for formatting rich text with a plain text editor. GitHub has their own formal implementation of Markdown called GitHub Flavored Markdown. Many online sites use Markdown for their content, like not just GitHub, but GitLab, Reddit, Stack Exchange, Bitbucket, Drupal, many more. So you might already be more familiar with Markdown than you realize because it's pretty common. So you make your changes here in the text box. If you're not familiar with Markdown, it's pretty easy to understand. You kind of get the idea. The number of pounds is the heading, and there's stars and underscores and asterisks used for things like bold and italics and things like that. And hyperlinks look kind of like hyperlinks would on Wikipedia, for example. It's like brackets and parentheses afterwards. Easy to understand if you just kind of just compare the live version with the Markdown. Make your changes here in the text box. Again, if you're not familiar with Markdown, it's pretty easy to get rolling. Don't worry about it being perfect. Again, don't worry about it being perfect. I cannot emphasize this enough. The content team, somebody like me on a docs team, was always going to review your content submission and potentially tweak it to Microsoft standards for formatting or style or things like that, make sure the links work. before it's merged. So don't worry about that part. Just get the info in there, get the content in there, get the docs fix or the addition in there. There are plenty of resources online for learning about basic Markdown syntax, but you don't need to learn about this stuff just to contribute to Markdown. You'll see it's mostly plain text, right? If you don't get something quite right, don't sweat it. I'm going to talk more about that. Once you're done, make your changes, hit the big green commit changes button. GitHub is a series of big green buttons. I cannot emphasize that enough. When in doubt, hit the big green button. Here you can propose your changes by committing your changes to your own branch. If you're unfamiliar with this terminology, I'm actually going to explain this later, but again, it's not super important that you know. There's going to be a pop-up window. Enter your pull request's title and your comments. Maybe explain why you're making this change. Or give us a little bit more context. The default commit message is fine, but it will be public. All this stuff is public, by the way, so be nice. Maybe make it informative. If you're not familiar with GitHub terminology like pull requests, like branches, like commits, don't worry, you don't have to be. Again, big green button to propose changes here, and frankly, we'll take it from there. We'll keep you updated as your pull request moves through the process. Your changes to the markdown of the file will be proposed for merge. They'll be triaged by usually multiple people inside Microsoft, and they will be reviewed by the article's author and other reviewers that could include engineers and people on the product team. No joke, all these people will be involved. The content team for the article takes it from there. We may reply to your pull request in comments. We'll make further edits if necessary, and eventually we'll decide on whether or not to merge your changes. You'll be notified along the way with feedback directly from one of us on the content team. Again, you can do all of this through your own tooling as well, through VS Code or for Visual Studio. Create your own fork, your own branch, your own commits, do a push, and then create a pull request. That's what I do on the content team every day. But if you want to just use the github.com website to handle the entire process for you with nothing to download or install, it's actually much easier, and you can see how easy it is. So again, your PR will be assigned to human reviewers. Human and automated messages from the build engine will appear in the conversation tab. And there's going to be a files change tab to review everything that you've changed line by line. Others, including folks inside Microsoft, might make comments or suggestions using that files change tab. Here's a look at a pull request. This is what it looks like after you've submitted your pull request. You see this is an open pull request right here. Automated systems will kick in. You see a whole bunch of automated messages at the bottom here, adding metadata, adding tags, automatically assigning some Microsoft staff. We have a significant amount of engineering behind all of this. Human authors and reviewers will be assigned. Both human and automated messages will appear in this conversation tab. And you can see with the blue arrow that I've added right here, you can see the actual commit. Of all of the history of this pull request, that's the actual commit to this branch. And there can be many commits in a branch. So we'll scroll down. You can see there's another commit that's been added. Maybe after you finish typing one thing out, you noticed a typo and you can go and fix another thing. So Kendra here has added a second commit to this branch. 2 commits now show up in the conversation tab. Great. A branch can include one or many commits, and a pull request is simply a relationship between 2 branches, your branch and Microsoft's branch. So how do you go about adding another commit, by the way? We'll go to open up this branch, either click on this link to go to your branch, and then you can continue to use github.com to edit any file, not just the file that you've edited, but any file in that branch. Or you can use the Files Change tab, and we'll talk about that. Your pull request will start in an open status, obviously. Let's look at one that's already been merged, which means it's been accepted, and soon it will be merged live into a production repo, usually within the day. This, for example, was an excellent PR worth showing off. You can see what GitHub did for us here was to automatically, in the background, create a fork, create a branch here in the user's name. This one's just called patch 1. The default branch name is fine. Here's the pull request, and here's the commit right here with the red arrow. In the pull request log, this is the actual commit right here, all the way down at the bottom. Again, the PR is going to contain both automated and manually created messages. You see people, you will see humans and machines talking, right? Eventually, someone on the content team, like I did myself right here in this screenshot, will review it and make edits and maybe sign off to the change and have it merged. And you'll see those comments too. And you'll receive an email anytime you uses your username with an @ symbol. And you can respond in conversation as well. This Files Change tab, let's talk about this. This Files Change tab in the pull request shows you exactly what has changed. And here you can see it's green on the right, that's the new stuff, and red on the left, that's the old stuff. This is the in-browser differential, right? Really easy to understand. If you're used to not seeing things side by side, there's a way to see it top and bottom. You can go to the unified view where the changes lines are stacked together. And so it would look like this. This is really easy to change in github.com. Again, this is all within github.com. So here you can see the updates in the sentence, maybe a little clearer. Perhaps the sentence didn't translate well, or it was unclear or vague. This is a good edit, right? If you're trying to describe how something should change, simply making the change yourself is usually much easier. You know, you're showing, not telling. Rather than trying to describe your contribution, like, hey, in the third paragraph under this heading, this sentence doesn't quite make sense. No, just go and show us what you want to change. That's the beauty of a pull request, right? So again, if you want to make more changes to this file, over here in the right-hand side, there's that dot menu. You can create another commit to the same pull request. This is another way. We talked about going to the branch. This is another way to do this. Simply click the three dots and then click Edit File. Edit the same file, hit the big green button again to submit another commit to the same branch, and it will be included in the same pull request. But there's actually an even more interactive and collaborative way to contribute to pull requests on GitHub. You might see us doing this to your pull requests. You can do this to other pull requests too. So this is a GIF. I'll let it play a couple times. I want to show this off because GitHub introduced this only in the past year or two. And these in-browser suggestions are a really easy way to give very specific, context-rich, information-rich collaboration on a pull request. We do this internally between docs, the product, and the engineering teams at Microsoft regularly. So minor edits like the ones we talked about before can be suggested entirely within the browser. And you can suggest minor edits to minor edits this way too. So instead of editing the whole file, you or anyone else, this is all public by the way, can join your effort to contribute to the doc by contributing a suggestion, and this GIF is walking you through it. So I'm hitting the big blue plus button. I'm going to hit that plus minus button to add a suggestion, and then you can see I'm actually editing the line. It's pre-populated the old line, and now I can make changes to the line itself, and I can either add a single comment or I can start a review of multiple comments that will all be batched together. And then it creates an easy to accept suggestion. I can then accept that suggestion with a single button click, and now we have co-authored, it actually shows up as both of us, co-authored a commit to this file in the branch. That's pretty cool, and you can see how easy it is. Again, at no point did I have to write any git bash commands. I can do this all through the browser. You can see how easy. Okay, here's another view of the big blue plus button in action. This time I'm going to drag and edit multiple lines. Yeah, lines 31 and 32. And now it's giving me 2 lines. And this makes it easy to collaborate with the doc's authors and reviewers entirely within github.com. Again, after you've submitted your pull request and you're happy with the changes, you sit back. We've got it from there. We'll let you know if you have any questions, maybe give you a status update. But otherwise, eventually somebody at Microsoft will hit sign off, or maybe we'll close it and bring it in internally, and we'll tell you about that. We do that sometimes too. The sign-off comment starts more automation and a big process behind the scenes. More information will show up in the pull request log. If it's small enough and it qualifies for a few different criteria, it might just quickly and automatically merge, or most commonly, a non-technical grammar cop, essentially. An editor may review as well, what we call in Microsoft a V-dash, which is a contractor. Often they are the last to review. They don't have much technical knowledge, but they can follow a style guide really well, and they're really good at grammar and structure and stuff like that. So this is someone non-technical who will review for compliance and style. Once merged, usually twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day, the thing will show up live publicly, and there you go. And then you can look for yourself in the contributor lists. If you've contributed via a pull request and we merge your commit into the document, even if we pull your commit internally and then publish your commit via an internal process, which does happen, I'll explain that a little bit, you will get your GitHub profile pic and link in the doc that you contributed to. The folks here listed are both internal and external to Microsoft who submitted commits to an article. So it's worth mentioning, again, that if you start a PR and we pull it in, or we tell you that we're going to handle this as an internal thing, your commit's probably still going to make it in to get GitHub contribution. We try to do that to make sure that you still get contributor credit. All of these contributions can be part of your MVP application or your renewal activity. And again, quality over quantity for these things. All right. Any questions? I'll pause for a sec. All right. Let's talk more about contribution. Again, I want you to have confidence and no fear about getting involved with pull requests, how to stop worrying and love the pull request. If you're not sure how it should change, give it a shot. Get the ball rolling. If it's not formatted perfectly, don't worry about that. Somebody like me will adjust that kind of thing, but at least you've drawn attention to it and at least it will get fixed. Do not be afraid to submit a pull request. So here's some other notes about this. For images, graphics, charts, screenshots, we have designers, we have internal methods to do that kind of thing. You do not need to open up Photoshop or something like that to start editing an image. We have all sorts of rules internally about that kind of stuff. So if it's images, just kind of maybe comment and tell us what about the images changed. We don't expect you to go hacking images together. Let's talk about capitalization. Capitalization is tough. SpongeBob font right there. Capitalization of various features and products inside Microsoft is one of the more nuanced bits there is about publishing. Marketing usually wins these. Marketing always wins these arguments when it comes to what should and should not be capitalized, what something should be called. We see sometimes big pull requests come through to make capitalization changes just en masse, right? And they're well intended. That's great. But they're misguided potentially. The task is tricky enough when you have access to the information directly from the marketing internal sources. So we usually try to handle that part of the docs. Yes, if you spot inconsistencies between marketing content and documentation or between two different documents and training content, you should know we're regularly discussing this kind of stuff and working on this stuff, but do not be afraid to point something out. That's fine. About, hey, why are we capitalizing it this or that? That's not exactly the highest impact contribution, but we do welcome it. But for example, product names and feature names are trickiest when a generic word is part of the product name. So just because we have a product called Azure SQL Database doesn't mean that every time we say the word database, it now needs to be capitalized, because database is still a generic thing that you can have. Azure Functions, Azure Firewall, the same thing. You can have an Azure function capitalized, but you create a function lowercase with it, right? Try to remember that when you go to Taco Time, which is a Pacific Northwest thing, I'm here in Seattle, and you order a taco, you are ordering a small taco, a lowercase taco. You're not ordering a capital taco just because you're at capital Taco Time. Taco Time, by the way, I'm from Louisiana in the United States, which is a state known for having food that has flavor. Taco Time does not have flavor. Anyway, to me. This is more difficult even for our international partners and our customers, because our documentation is automatically translated to dozens of languages, right? So capitalization can mean different things to translation. It may mean that a product or service name should not be translated or should be translated in a specific way, but a lowercase common noun of the same term should be translated. Translation is difficult enough, right? So it's important we get this right, and inconsistency in capitalization can confuse translators and customers. So when it comes to comments in code, and by the way, I'm going to go back, I'm going to tell you about translation and how to file translation feedback too in the next slide. Informative comments in code must also appear in text. This is something you can help us with too, because code is not translated, right? And so if you are burying comments that explain what code is doing in the code, that's not going to be translated for everyone in the world to benefit from, right? So oftentimes that's why we break up big code blocks, and we have to explain what code is doing outside of the code block. This could be a great way to contribute. If you find code blocks that have a lot of context in English in the code sample, but not outside of the code sample, that's a great pull request to start with. So when it comes to grammar and style and capitalization and code comments and everything that we've talked about on this slide, remember that the core goals of our brand voice is to, above all, be simple and human. So don't be too informal. Use common word choices, but also stay away from jargon and extremely technical or academic terms. Even if they're totally accurate, we try not to use extremely technical terms. Let's make sure that we're writing docs that are helpful and approachable. And if we could do better to meet that goal, well, hey, that's what a pull request is for. One last bit about contributions for localization issues, such as a translation issue on a localized version of our content. If you've got a translation issue to raise, these are all submitted through a form, aka MS Provide-feedback. Submit your feedback in any language on this form. It will be translated and routed to the correct localization team. And per that localization team, their feedback is usually triaged within 24 hours. And if there's a valid fix that they're going to take action on, it'll be fixed within 1 to 2 weeks. If you've got a technical issue with an article and you're more comfortable submitting your issue or your pull request essentially in another language besides English, no problem. Instead of creating a pull request in English, you can use the same form, this form. It will be translated and then passed along to the proper content teams, like my team. So either way, thanks for contributing and making Microsoft Docs better for everyone, everywhere. Okay, I only have about 9 minutes, so I'm going to blast through this quick rundown of how Microsoft uses GitHub to create docs behind the scenes in an open source way. So behind the scenes, most Microsoft docs are edited in Markdown. I mentioned that, and we spend most of our time in Visual Studio Code or a shell of Visual Studio Code called Azure Data Studio. We have other tools to help with things like automated link checking, with syntax formatting, with bulk updates to rename things, and a series of include files to tokenize things like product names. You may see these include files if you're looking at our Markdown. We have a rich set of metadata for each article, and we do pay attention to how things work in terms of search engine optimization. Just like any retail website or e-commerce site, we do look at that kind of stuff too. On the back end, that is stored in big Kusto databases. We use Azure Analytics. Most of our decisions with docs and docs layouts are data-driven. So when we are driven by better engagement or more useful docs, we try to follow that lead and look for results later on. For big article updates, like for example, the upcoming Build conference that we mentioned at the very beginning, we have systems to release branches all at once for when we want to work on documentation for months and months and months at a time privately, and then release it all publicly during the keynote on May 21st at Build. Many of these strategies aren't far off from what developers would use to do a software release all at once using the same tools. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that. But let's talk about some basics of GitHub. If you're absolutely brand new to GitHub, hopefully this will be a nice explainer to you and help you get some confidence and get over that barrier to entry here. So behind the scenes of how Microsoft Docs works in GitHub, where all Microsoft documentation is managed. If you're new to Git and don't understand, don't worry. This is mostly managed for you. Again, remember the grid, big green buttons. Here's the basic GitHub workflow. A repository, like Azure Docs, is where the source is housed and where the website engine pulls Markdown to present live pages to you in the website learn.microsoft.com. That's where the actual Markdown is stored, right? A fork is a copy of this repo associated with your account in GitHub. And so everybody has a fork created for the repo in their own GitHub account. I do, all my partners do, everybody who's contributed externally does too. You all have a fork. This is created for you in GitHub automatically with a single click of a big green button first time you need it. To tell the two apart, a common convention is to reference your remote fork, the one that is in your account, as origin, and the code base you'll eventually push to as upstream. These are called remote names or just remotes. And these are just the common naming conventions. You can actually choose any name you want. You'll have an origin and an upstream for each repo that you work in. A clone is a copy of the fork that is downloaded locally to your workstation so that you've made it. You clone your own origin and bring it down, and now all the files are physically on your workstation so that you can make edits to them. And when you go to make edits to any of those files or to add or remove files, you'll create what's called a working branch that is relevant to the chunk of changes that you'll be making. And you want to make sure a branch only contains the changes for a specific change feature or an issue that you're addressing so that it can be treated as an atomic block of changes as it moves back up the stream. Your work goes into a branch, and here the branch is just called fix issue with an ISO date at the beginning. That's a very common naming convention. And when you're done, you will issue a commit to the branch locally to your own clone on your own workstation. And you've created a commit in a branch, great. But at this point, GitHub has no idea of any of the work you've done, and Microsoft has not seen any of the work you've done either. You commit you do a push to a branch, and this pushes from your workstation back to your fork in GitHub. So now your fork in GitHub has your changes, github.com has your changes. Microsoft still doesn't know what you've done at all. For that, you need to create a pull request. Pull request is simply a comparison between two branches. Here you ask the Microsoft Docs repository to look at and accept commits from your repository's branch so that your changes can be merged from your fork into the repo's main branch. And that's it. That's the whole process, right? Now, to explain a little closer to how the reality of things work internally, we actually have two repositories in the Microsoft Docs account. The Azure Docs repository drives the website. It's public, but like true professionals, we do not develop against production. We only develop in a preview repository or a private repository, Azure Docs PR. And so we follow that same upstream lifecycle that we just talked about, but internally in private, that's how we can talk about stuff and work on stuff that's not public yet, right? So we only develop in this -PR repository, which is not visible to the public and allows us to work in and preview the merged state of our changes to the actual live repository. This build process to the live website then occurs twice a day, and it's gated by a team of build reviewers too. But when you submit pull requests, all you have to worry about in that entire workflow happens inside the public repository. All validation necessary occurs inside that public repository like Azure Docs. And again, the same Docs as code pattern applies to any Microsoft technology repository in Microsoft Docs. Here are some learning resources for you on Learn about how you can use Git and github.com entirely within the browser with nothing to download. If you're interested in learning more about Git and GitHub, here's some great resources. All right, I only have a few minutes. I'm going to talk about some stuff real quick. AI is a thing. You may have heard about this little thing called AI. We have metadata and we have some tags that may appear in articles if these articles used approved AI services to help ethically acknowledge that AI was used for some of these docs. You may already see some of these live. Manage Azure Resource Groups by using Python has this tag, for example, as one of the first trials. You will see this. And this is our way of trying to ethically acknowledge that we are using AI in document generation. If you don't see it, you can assume it was just humans. Multiple accounts in your Learn profile. And this way, your Learn profile can serve as a digital resume and a proof of skills. In Learn, select the profile icon at the top right corner, select setting and account management, and you can add multiple accounts. I know for me, I had an account for my certification exams 25 years ago and an account at school. I had a personal account. I had a work account. I can actually put all those together right now and to make sure that I get credit for all those different things, right? There's a contributor home. I think we talked about this at the very beginning. It puts everything together for you. You can look at your user profile right there. You can connect Pearson VUE to it. You can connect your certifications, your exams, your training, your instructor-led training, all in the same place. And there's actually a Learn module all about what we talked about today. So one of the things highlighted in the new contributor homepage is a Learn module to help get started contributing to Docs. Just what we covered. So if you want to go through and get a Learn module under your belt to talk about what I just gave you all the answers to, here you go. This was introduced just last year. It's a 9-unit Learn module that has a knowledge check and an exercise to get rolling with contributions to Microsoft open source Docs. We estimate it takes about 30 minutes to complete, and it includes GitHub contribution fundamentals and how to edit a published article in github.com. All right, I have finished exactly on time. Any quick questions that we could cover before the end? I know it's a lot of information. I'd be happy to chat. Reach out to me on LinkedIn if you'd like, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. I know we are just about up. Mohammed, any quick questions in the chat?
That was amazing session, William. I really loved it. So this is really was important that to have this session and tell these stuff like about Microsoft Docs and all the contributions. This was something missing. So thanks really for this great slides. I really love the slides and the content. That was perfect.
Great. Great. Fantastic. Hopefully recording is useful to you as well. There's a Learn module all about this stuff. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to reach out externally. Thanks so much.
Currently, we have on YouTube and on StreamYard 4 live, but on LinkedIn currently we have 27 live watching. So any questions or anything you have in mind, just share. But the thing is, the comments we are getting on LinkedIn site, it's not showing on StreamYard, so I'm just checking LinkedIn. So if there's any question, just ask. So it's totally fine.
Cool. I'm actually just looking through the comments now. I see some other fans of dark themed stuff. So there you go. Excellent. Excellent dark theme. Fantastic. Hey, thanks everybody for your time. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Thanks, William. Have a great day.